On the morning of December 6, 1917, Halifax, Nova Scotia, awoke like it had countless mornings before. The city was alive with the sounds of ships, factories, and workers beginning another winter day. Few people could have imagined that within hours, Halifax would suffer one of the deadliest non-nuclear explosions in human history. At the time, the First World War had been raging across Europe for more than 3 years. Although the fighting was taking place thousands of miles away, Halifax had become one of the British Empire's most important ports. Its deep natural harbor served as a vital gateway between North America and Europe. Every week, military convoys gathered there before crossing the Atlantic, carrying soldiers, ammunition, fuel, and supplies to the battlefields overseas. The harbor never truly slept. Cargo ships arrived from around the world. Naval vessels patrolled the waters. Dockworkers loaded and unloaded enormous quantities of freight from dawn until nightfall. For the people of Halifax, this constant activity had become part of everyday life. Children walked to school. Merchants opened their shops. Families watched ships enter and leave the harbor from their windows. No one paid much attention to the endless parade of vessels. But not every ship carried ordinary cargo. Because of the war, some transported materials so dangerous that a single mistake could have catastrophic consequences. One of those ships was already approaching Halifax Harbour. She was a French cargo vessel named SS Mont-Blanc. From the outside, she appeared unremarkable. There was nothing about her weathered hull to suggest the danger hidden inside. But below her decks lay one of the most volatile cargoes ever carried through a civilian harbor. Thousands of tons of explosives, high explosives, explosive chemicals, highly flammable fuel. Together, they formed a floating bomb capable of destroying an entire section of a city. To reduce the risk of enemy attack, the ship displayed no warning signs indicating the deadly cargo it carried. Most people watching from the shoreline had no idea what was passing before them. At almost the same moment, another vessel was preparing to leave the harbor. Its name was SS Mont-Blanc. Within the next few minutes, the paths of these two ships would cross, and a routine morning would become one of the darkest days in Canadian history. Just after 8 o'clock that morning, Halifax Harbour was already busy with ships moving through its narrow channel. Navigation inside the harbor followed strict rules. With so many military and commercial vessels sharing the same waterway, captains were expected to communicate clearly and carefully. But on December 6, 1917, something began to go wrong. The French cargo ship SS Mont-Blanc slowly entered the harbor. Her captain knew exactly how dangerous his cargo was. Beneath the decks were nearly 3,000 tons of explosives and highly flammable materials destined for the war in Europe. Every maneuver had to be made with extreme caution. Coming from the opposite direction was the Norwegian relief ship SS Mont-Blanc. Unlike Mont-Blanc, IMO carried no explosives. She had spent several days in Halifax waiting for permission to sail and was eager to begin her journey across the Atlantic. As both ships approached the harbor's narrowest section, each crew expected the other to give way. A series of whistle signals echoed across the water, one blast, then another. The signals quickly turned into disagreement. Neither captain wanted to alter course. Each believed the other vessel should move first. For several tense moments, both ships continued forward. Crew members watched nervously from their decks. The distance between the vessels shrank with every passing second. Realizing the danger, both crews finally attempted emergency maneuvers. Engines were reversed, helms were turned, but it was already too late. At approximately 8:45 that morning, the bow of SS Mont scraped violently against the starboard side of SS Mont-Blanc. The impact itself was relatively minor. No massive explosion, no collapsing ships. To many people watching from the shoreline, it appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary harbor accident. But hidden beneath Mont-Blanc's deck, disaster had already begun. The collision knocked over barrels of highly flammable benzol stored on the ship. The liquid spilled across the deck. As the damaged ships scraped against one another, friction produced sparks. Within seconds, Flames erupted. The crew of Mont-Blanc understood immediately what the people on shore did not. Their ship had become a giant burning fuse leading directly to thousands of tons of explosives. There was almost nothing they could do to stop it. The only chance of survival was to abandon the ship. As thick black smoke rose into the cold morning sky, hundreds of curious residents gathered along the waterfront to watch the burning vessel drift silently toward the heart of Halifax. None of them realized they were standing only moments away from one of the most devastating explosions the world had ever witnessed. As the flames spread across the deck of SS Mont-Blanc, her crew rowed desperately toward shore. They shouted warnings to anyone who would listen. Run! The ship is loaded with explosives. But few people understood what they meant. Many couldn't even hear them over the noise of the busy harbor. Others simply stopped to watch. Fire aboard a ship was unusual, but hardly unimaginable in a major port. Dock workers paused their tasks. Office employees gathered at windows overlooking the harbor. Children walking to school pointed toward the thick column of black smoke rising into the sky. Some even climbed onto rooftops for a better view. Photographers prepared their cameras. No one realized they were witnessing the final minutes before catastrophe. For nearly 20 minutes, the burning Mont-Blanc drifted helplessly through the harbor. Every passing second allowed the fire to reach deeper into the deadly cargo below. Then, at exactly 9:04:35 in the morning, the world exploded. A blinding white flash consumed the harbor. In an instant, thousands of tons of high explosives detonated simultaneously. The explosion released an unimaginable amount of energy. A massive fireball rose thousands of feet into the air. The shockwave raced across Halifax faster than the speed of sound. Buildings closest to the harbor simply disappeared. Entire streets were flattened. Steel rails twisted like soft wire. Ships weighing thousands of tons were thrown onto the shoreline. The blast shattered windows nearly 100 kilometers away. People who had been watching from their windows suffered terrible injuries as shattered glass exploded inward. Within seconds, thousands of homes had been damaged or destroyed. The force of the explosion displaced an enormous volume of seawater. A powerful tsunami swept across the harbor, flooding nearby docks and carrying wreckage deep into the city. Pieces of SS Mont-Blanc were launched high into the sky. Some landed several kilometers from the harbor. Others were never found. For a brief moment, silence. Then came the screams, smoke, fire, collapsing buildings. Entire neighborhoods had vanished in less than a second. More than 1,600 buildings were destroyed. Thousands of people lay trapped beneath debris. Those who survived struggled to understand what had just happened. Many believed Halifax had been attacked by the Germans. Others feared a second explosion was imminent. The city had become a landscape of rubble, fire, and unimaginable devastation. But the disaster was not over for the survivors. The fight to stay alive had only just begun. Within moments of the explosion, Halifax had become a disaster zone. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to rubble. Fires burned across the city as shattered buildings collapsed into the streets. Those who had survived the blast staggered through clouds of dust, smoke, and debris, searching desperately for family members and friends. Communication had nearly collapsed. Telephone lines were destroyed. Telegraph offices lay in ruins. Many roads were blocked by fallen buildings, overturned streetcars, and wreckage carried by the explosion. Hospitals were overwhelmed almost immediately. Doctors and nurses worked without rest as hundreds of injured civilians arrived within minutes. Many had suffered severe burns. Others were buried beneath collapsed homes for hours before rescuers could reach them. One of the most common injuries was blindness. Thousands of people had been standing near windows, watching the burning ship before it exploded. When the blast shattered the glass, countless fragments were hurled into their faces. Entire hospital wards were soon filled with patients suffering devastating eye injuries. Across the harbor, survivors became rescuers. Soldiers, sailors, firefighters, railway workers, and ordinary citizens dug through mountains of debris with their bare hands. Every cry for help offered hope that someone might still be alive beneath the wreckage. But as the day continued, another disaster approached. That evening, a powerful winter snowstorm swept across Halifax. Heavy snow and freezing winds covered the ruined city. Rescue crews struggled to reach those still trapped. Collapsed buildings became even more dangerous. The freezing temperatures threatened survivors who had lost their homes. Despite the brutal conditions, help began arriving from neighboring towns and cities. One of the first large-scale rescue efforts came from Boston, Massachusetts. Doctors, nurses, medical supplies, and emergency workers boarded special relief trains and rushed north toward Halifax. Their assistance would save countless lives. As rescue operations continued, officials began the painful task of counting the victims. The numbers grew with every passing day. Nearly 2,000 people had lost their lives. More than 9,000 were injured. Entire families had vanished. Thousands of homes no longer existed. It quickly became clear that Halifax had experienced one of the worst disasters in Canadian history. But one question still remained. How could a single collision between two ships destroy an entire city? The investigation that followed would reveal a chain of mistakes and lessons that would forever change maritime safety. In the days that followed, investigators faced a city that had been almost impossible to recognize. The harbor was filled with twisted steel, shattered ships, and debris scattered across the shoreline. Entire blocks had vanished. The force of the explosion had erased streets that had existed for generations. Officials immediately launched an inquiry to determine how such a catastrophe could have happened. Witnesses were interviewed. Harbor pilots gave testimony. Surviving crew members from both ships described the final minutes before the collision. Navigation records were carefully examined. Every whistle signal, every maneuver, every decision made that morning came under intense scrutiny. The investigation revealed that no single mistake had caused the disaster. Instead, it was a chain of small decisions. Miscommunication, conflicting navigation signals, delayed reactions, and the dangerous reality of carrying enormous quantities of explosives through one of the busiest civilian harbors in North America. One fact became impossible to ignore. Few people in Halifax had known what the SS Mont-Blanc was carrying. Because of wartime security, the ship displayed no warning markings that could reveal its deadly cargo. The secrecy was intended to protect the vessel from enemy attack, but it also meant that firefighters, harbor workers, and curious civilians had no idea they were standing beside what was, in effect, a floating bomb. The legal investigation that followed became one of the most controversial in Canadian history. At first, several members of the Mont-Blanc's crew and harbor officials were blamed for the disaster. Some were even arrested. But after years of court proceedings and appeals, responsibility proved far more complicated than anyone had expected. No single person could be held solely responsible. The Halifax explosion had been the result of multiple failures occurring at exactly the wrong moment. The tragedy forced governments and shipping authorities around the world to reconsider how dangerous cargo should be transported. New safety procedures were introduced. Harbor traffic regulations became stricter. Communication between ships was improved. The lessons learned in Halifax would influence maritime safety for decades to come. Yet beyond the investigations, beyond the courtrooms, beyond the official reports, the greatest challenge still remained. An entire city had to rebuild itself from the ruins, and somehow, its people found the strength to begin again. The Halifax explosion lasted only a few seconds. Its consequences would last for generations. In the weeks that followed, thousands of survivors faced an impossible task. They had lost their homes, their families, their livelihoods. Entire neighborhoods had disappeared beneath mountains of rubble. Yet despite the overwhelming devastation, Halifax refused to surrender. Communities came together to rebuild the city piece by piece. Workers cleared shattered streets. Engineers reconstructed the harbor. Families slowly returned to places that had once been reduced to ruins. One act of generosity became a lasting symbol of hope. The city of Boston, whose doctors, nurses, and relief workers had rushed to Halifax after the explosion, formed a bond with the Canadian city that continues to this day. As a gesture of gratitude, Nova Scotia began sending Boston a Christmas tree each year. More than a century later, that tradition still continues, serving as a reminder that compassion can emerge even from unimaginable tragedy. The Halifax explosion also changed the way the world viewed dangerous cargo. Ports introduced stricter navigation rules. Communication procedures between ships became more standardized. Explosive materials were handled with far greater caution. The lessons learned in Halifax helped improve maritime safety around the world. Today, historians estimate that nearly 2,000 people lost their lives. More than 9,000 were injured. At the time, it was the largest human-made explosion in history, a record that would stand until the development of the atomic bomb decades later. But numbers alone can never tell the full story. Behind every statistic was a person, a child walking to school, a dockworker beginning another ordinary morning, a family watching ships from a window, lives that changed forever in less than a second. Today, memorials stand across Halifax to honor those who never returned home. Visitors can still walk along the harbor where the explosion occurred. The water is calm now. The city has been rebuilt. Little remains to suggest that one of history's greatest explosions happened there. But beneath that peaceful skyline lies a story the world should never forget. History often remembers wars through the battles that were fought, yet sometimes the greatest tragedies happen far from the front lines. On the morning of December 6, 1917, one collision between two ships changed an entire city forever. The explosion lasted only moments. Its legacy has endured for more than a century. Thank you for watching Forgotten Files. If you enjoy exploring forgotten disasters, historical mysteries, and the true events that shaped our world, consider subscribing and joining us for the next chapter of history.